Tracking heat, wind, and thunderstorms. I'm ABC 10 Chief Meteorologist Monica Woods with a look at our ABC 10 Plus weather impact elements that we'll be dealing with throughout the course of the rest of the week. As we head into our midweek forecast, we get a little bit of a break from the heat, particularly on Thursday, as a bit more of that onshore flow develops. Now, there will be some problems with that wind that will come at a cost of increased fire danger. We'll go over that. But then we start to build in some of the heat as we dig closer to the upcoming weekend. Not quite in the record territory that we were at last weekend, but it is going to get quite warm. We've got a persistent pattern with us for the most part. Periodically, we'll see these offshore lows develop, and that will keep the active weather going in the Sierra. But we're basically under this ridge of high pressure, so a fairly stable environment for the valley with sinking warming air. We keep those temperatures slightly above average. Nothing too extreme. It's just we are going to see a bump up slightly over the course of the weekend. Offshore lows, as I mentioned, are pretty evident here. You can see the counterclockwise circulation and also some thunderstorm activity developing mainly in the central Sierra for our Tuesday. Offshore, we see the development of another low. So periodically we'll see some thunderstorms pop up primarily along the Sierra Spine, but also in parts of Southern California along the Grapevine and I-5. We see the opportunity for some afternoon predominantly thunderstorm activity. Our weather impact team will keep our weather forecast going on ABC 10 Plus. That's where you can download content for free wherever you stream for free on TV. On our weather playlist, we've got these extended forecasts as well as weather explainers and weather and climate specials. So check that out. Here's a look at our top 3 headlines that we're going to be tracking. With the heat risk, it's going to be moderate heat risk, but also cold water safety. Our second top 3 headline is going to be gusty winds developing with fire weather conditions and fire weather safety. And we'll wrap it up with our third top headline, isolated thunderstorms. And we'll talk about lightning safety as well. So let's get into the heat risk. It's going to be in the moderate range, kind of peppered throughout the valley, if you will, throughout much of the work week. It somewhat starts to become a bit more reduced on our Thursday outlook, but comes back Friday, expands Saturday into Sunday, even into early next week, where we'll see moderate heat risks develop throughout much of the valley as we head into the weekend and early next week as well. So again, a fairly persistent pattern, nothing too extreme, but under this ridge of high pressure, we've got the sinking warming air. And again, periods of those lows popping up along the coast, which will add some instability predominantly for the higher elevations where we see the opportunity for some thunderstorms into at least the midweek outlook. Our temperature trend has been quite favorable over the past couple of days at least. We've seen our average temperature on Sunday, 90s on Monday, that coming after seeing those 100s on Friday and Saturday. Those were going to be the 2 hottest days of the year that we've seen so far. The rundown of May, the reason why I wanted to show this is just given the recent heat that we've seen over May and very little wetting rain, things are drying out quite quickly. We've now seen not only our first 95-degree day, but also our first 100-degree day coming over the weekend on May 30th, so last Friday, and then again on Saturday. We await that first 105-degree day. The average is July 7th. It's just around the corner where we really start to dig into some extreme conditions in the valley. That being said, it's time to consider those river temperatures. It's a great place to cool off, do some recreation, but they still remain very fast, cold, and high due to snowmelt. Sacramento River near Sacramento is right around 70 degrees, but the American River right below Folsom, where they do some of those releases, is still sitting in the mid-50s. Now, it's warmer at San Joaquin near Stockton in the mid-70s, but that's largely because it is farther away from the snowmelt and has the opportunity to have some surface warming happening. So again, the farther away we are from the snowmelt, the warmer those temperatures in the water tend to be. So Tuolumne near LaGrange is at 53 degrees. That's going to be much, much closer to that snowmelt. Sierra and foothill waters right around 50 to 60 degrees, and that's pretty close to where the Lake Tahoe water temperature is mid-buoy at only about 5-meter depth. As we go down in depth, that water temperature decreases substantially. Cold water impacts. Now, the temperatures that we're dealing with right now are right about in this range right here, between about 50 and 70 degrees. At that point, you can begin to lose control of your muscles, as well as it making it difficult to breathe. Kind of takes your breath away when you get into that cold water. So the way to stay safe in the water is you always want to wear a life jacket. That is first and foremost. We hear it time and time again from first responders that life vests save lives. Keep a close eye on children. Avoid alcohol, and cold water impacts can impact breathing. We talked about that. Plus, strong currents make for tough rescues. So think about it. If you're having a tough time getting out of the water, it's also very difficult to have those rescuers go in and pull you out as well. Our number 2 top headline is with the gusty winds, and that is going to elevate the fire danger. So practicing fire weather safety should be first and foremost when we're going outside this time of year. Future wind gusts, we're pulling in just a slight breeze coming in from the Pacific during the afternoon. That's relatively a typical pattern that we see at this point in the season. We've got the difference of the warm valley air in opposition to the cool Pacific air, and our wind is driven by the change in temperature. So those temperature differences really pull in that nice cool breeze during the evening. By Wednesday morning, we start to see just a bit of development here through the north and central part of the Sacramento Valley, elevating slightly that fire danger. Now, we'll still see the opportunity of those late day onshore winds come in, but then we start to see the offshore winds once again during the evening. So Wednesday is kind of a day to watch. I will mention this as well. Fairfield had a pretty decent fire spread come in on our Monday, and we didn't even have those offshore winds. We actually had quite a bit of humidity coming in with some cooler temperatures and a nice onshore flow, but those winds always make it difficult for firefighters to get those fires under control. They did, but again, took a little bit more time than would be expected given that the temperatures weren't too extreme and we had some favorable wind conditions with the humidity. It's just wind plus fire tends to be a difficult firefight. Significant fire potential will remain in the Sacramento Valley towards the coast here. We've got the moderate to dry conditions continuing. So a little bit of wind offshore, low humidity is going to drive up the potential for fire spread. I found this pretty interesting here. I did a cross comparison of the soil moisture back in May, in the middle of May. And you can see that we were seeing quite a bit of dryness develop throughout the Central Valley, that being from about Sacramento through roughly about Fresno. So large agricultural areas right through the Central Valley here. Now, fast forward just about not quite even a month, and you can see how the soil moisture has continued to dry out. So now we're not only seeing that throughout the Central Valley, but it is starting to expand into the foothills towards the coastal region, including the coastal range, and then parts of the northwest coast here. That's important because of the risk of dry fuels leading to the opportunity of fast spreading fires. When we have the fuel and a spark starts, that means we could have larger fires. Now, the energy release component is another way that we would track the potential for this. And right now, the white line is indicating where we are, still in that neutral category. Now, we've been bouncing around quite a bit over the past month just because of seeing some periods of some cooler conditions, a couple of showers that rolled on through. But now we're heading into a time frame where we will see less in the way of rain, more in the way of heat, more fuel, the opportunity of fast moving and larger fires. So this is in the blue line, kind of what we typically see during the year. We're a little bit ahead of pace right now, but that's not to say that we couldn't just catch up right here in the middle of and beginning of July back to near normal conditions. But the valley, the hills tends to dry out quicker than, say, the higher mountaintops where we still had some snow up to about a week ago or so. The go bag, the 5 Ps to have ready. Make sure you're ready for evacuations for people, pets. Have your papers ready, your prescriptions and photos. Those papers and prescriptions should also include any documentation to get back into your property, as well as prescriptions for your pets and your people. Have that crate ready to go, because we have seen time and time again that sometimes those evacuation places need you to have that crate for your pet. Preventing a spark. Well, we don't have a fire unless there's a spark. So this is a good way to prevent having to even need that go bag in the first place. Metal blades plus rocks equals fires. Also mow lawns, not dry grass or weeds. And we are seeing plenty of that throughout the coastal hills as well as the lower valley locations. Properly dispose of cigarettes and matches and watch for dragging vehicle parts. This is a big time of year to have those boats in tow or perhaps a trailer that need those chains to make sure they are not dragging on the road. We have seen where a little spark coming off that sparks something on the side of the road and it eventually ends up as a pretty significant fire. How many days has it been since we've seen a good wetting rain, at least even more than 1/10 of an inch? 65. Last time we had that was March 30th when we had 1/1600 of an inch of rain. And now it's really looking less likely that we'll see much in the way of rain. As you can see, our averages drop off significantly through the month of June, ending up with almost nothing July, August, and September for the entire month. I know, barely anything here. So that's really what leads to the increasing danger, and really peak fire season happens a little bit deeper into the summer, into the early fall, because of the length of time that we've gone without significant wetting rain. And conversely, we see our average monthly high going up. So rain opportunity goes down, temperatures go up, more drying, more fuel, bigger opportunity for fast spreading fires. So our temperatures average right around 88 degrees for all intents and purposes in June, and then it goes up to about 93 in July. As far as our drought monitor, we saw a little bit of change, not much, but the one area that is slightly concerning. Nothing too big, but this is what we look like on May 20th. And then this was the latest drought monitor. And you could see a slight expansion right up towards the Tahoe Basin, towards the higher elevation. And in fact, what we're seeing from the drought outlook is a bit more in the way of potential development throughout the central part of the state. So this is what it looked like, again, right around the middle of May. Now we fast forward, and this was the latest drought outlook where the potential for development exists throughout parts of the Sierra and the Central Valley. So this is something to watch because we just are coming off of 3 wet years in a row, which is a bit atypical. We usually don't see 3 in a row. So it's very likely with historic trends that we will be heading into drought for this 4th upcoming year. All right, the last headline that we're going to be tracking, isolated thunderstorms. So lightning safety is starting to become a factor as well. And certainly we've seen lightning sparked fires. So as we start to see some of the fuel dry out in the higher elevations, this will be something to watch as well. For the valley, we are dry, but Wednesday we start to see some of this thunderstorm risk pressing towards the Tahoe Basin. We've been seeing quite a bit towards Yosemite and Southern California. And then when we get into our Thursday outlook, that actually expands deeper into the Tahoe Basin and just slightly north of I-80 as we see a low just off the coast of the Bay Area. So instead of being more towards the Southern California area, we're seeing it more positioned just off the Bay Area coast. So lightning safety, a couple of things for folks that are heading up into the high country. Just be aware of these. Avoid beaches as well as picnic shelters. You don't want to be outside when there is thunder and lightning. You want to make sure that you bring it indoors. Avoid the top of hills and open fields. So that means hiking in the morning when we don't have the thunderstorm risk. Get that over, done with, bring it indoors, and spend some time inside where it's safe. Also, stay away from water. That can be a conductor there, so you don't want to be on the water when there's lightning around. Avoid trees or tall objects. Again, lightning, if it hits a tree, it can actually spread to where you are standing, so you want to make sure thunder roars, go indoors. That's the best way to avoid some of those bigger risk factors there. Highs in the 70s tomorrow for the Sierra. We'll track that opportunity for thunderstorms south of Highway 50 as we bring it down the hill. We're in the 80s and 90s. Still quite toasty for our Wednesday outlook. 60s along the coast as we head inland. We're in the 80s and farther inland through the Central Valley. Still looking at those low to mid 90s, well above average, awfully close to 100 for Colusa and Yuba City. But then we'll get a little bit of relief coming our way for our Thursday outlook. We'll be tracking the chance for some thunderstorms in the Tahoe Basin. We'll call it mostly sunny for right now with a buildup of afternoon cloud covers. For the hills, we've got sunny skies, but much warmer for the weekend outlook back into the 90s. We're in the 60s along the coast. This time of year, we tend to see a very stable weather pattern with Basically, some fog and highs staying in the 60s. Meantime, for the valley, it's going to be much warmer. So we've got highs in the 90s, 80s though on Thursday. That's our cool day of the work week. Getting into the weekend, we're right back into the 90s, and that's how we start off the next work week. But beyond that, we actually start to see some cooling by the time we get into next week, back into the 80s.